This is the tumbler that you're about to watch the tutorial for. It's definitely a labor of love and takes a lot of epoxy. So there's lots of ways that it can be modified to make it a little bit smoother process. But this was my very first one that actually didn't end up in the strip bucket. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer them. But I do answer a lot of questions and work through a lot of the issues during the recording of this video. So you know that old saying, fourth time's a charm? Yeah, me either, but here we go anyways. So we are going to do a Christmas lights tumbler like you saw in the thumbnail. We are using a Straubler from Stainless Steel Depot. Don't use that website, that's for retail. StainlessSteelDepot.com is the wholesale side of things. So I have my cup base painted already, but here is the cup. It's your typical 20 or 30. They do have 30 ounce, but it has this bottom here that comes with a foldable stainless steel straw right here. I already took mine out, but it comes with this right here, but we don't need it. It like stacks and goes in this little thing right here. We don't need that though. What I've done is clipped out this part here. I don't want these dividers in here. I bought these from Lowe's and I literally just snipped it piece by piece. I'm not going to do it because it's kind of loud, but as close to that part as you can get. These aren't as flush as I wish they were, but that's the best I could find without having to really go specialty and spend a lot of bucks. These were like $17 after tax. So you just kind of clip it out, kind of go at an angle, and then snip it away. There's lots of ways you can do it. That's how I did mine to end up here. This is so our battery pack has a place to not get demolished as we're doing this, right? This on-off motion. In my past tumbler, I did a notch where I stashed the wiring up the side, which now that this is actually cured enough, I had cut a notch on this one and stashed it here, and then I covered that a little bit with thin epoxy. I am worried about how that is going to wear down over time, so I actually have filed away some of this. I did a little bit of it with a kind of blunt tip X-Acto knife and just kind of shaved some of it. And then I put a little sewing machine oil on there so that it would flow really nicely on there, just like that. But on this one, oops, we've cut a hole right here. My concern with this is making sure to seal that up, because as you can see right there, you can see the gap there. So after I get my string of lights fed through that hole, I'm going to seal it up with Gorilla Epoxy before we do our glitter layer. Now this is going to be pretty tricky because I need it to not stick to the cup just yet until we're ready, but I need this fed through before I clog up that hole. So we have these adorable multicolored lights. These are significantly shorter than the lights that I got before that I was using on the Galaxy tumbler and on my first 3 attempts on this Christmas tumbler. I'm really frustrated. The very first time I mixed on like layer 4, maybe even 5, I mixed 2 of the same part. So clearly that's not going to cure. That is the first time I have ever done that. I was so angry because I couldn't clean it off enough. Sometimes you can clean it off enough to salvage it and coat it properly, and it'll still cure and blah, blah, blah. I thought that I got it cleaned off really good until I covered it with a fresh coat of really perfectly mixed epoxy, and it did not cure. It was still sticky. Oh, I was so mad. So That was the first attempt. Second attempt, I had my two turners too close to each other, and the battery pack that I had taped to the bottom fell off and stuck to the other cup that was turning, and it ripped it off. Literally broke the wires, ripped it right off of there. I mean, it just twisted. And the third one, battery pack was working fine, lights were working like a dream, and it wasn't working properly when I got to the very end stage. I was so distraught. Like, distraught is probably an understatement. So I'm going to tape this on here. What I think I'll do at the very end is do the sticky Velcro, because you need to be able to take this off, because you have to unscrew that and then pop these to be able to replace the batteries. So that's what I'm going to do for the moment. Just regular old electrical tape, just to hold it in place. Doesn't take very big of a piece, just enough to keep it here. And I'm going to kind of finagle around that wiring there. So eventually we're going to do this, wrapping it around. But for the moment, because I need to do my glitter, epoxy layer and glitter, we're going to do that right here. Let's wrap it a little smaller. Before I do that layer though, I do need to do my Gorilla Glue epoxy. So we'll wrap this up in a minute. Let me mix up a little bit of epoxy. It's literally the 1-to-1 ratio here. Just mix it up in a little medicine cup. It's not going to take much, really just a few drops, but we'll mix it up in here. It doesn't take a lot. As long as it's mixed right, we're in good shape. This stuff smells like a perm. Like, it smells like getting my hair done in like 1990. Man, that was forever ago. So I'm just going to, I kind of have this in the way right this minute, so I'm just going to kind of tape it over here off to the side. I just want it out of the way while I clog the hole there. I'm going to go ahead and do an ice test. I'm paranoid about breaking the seal on this by what I just did by drilling that hole in there. It should be fine by the time it's coated in epoxy, but I really want to be sure. So I don't really want this thicker stuff in here pulled all the way through. So I'm just going to kind of pull it partly. That'll help kind of keep it in place as well. So just like that. It really doesn't take a lot at all. There. Good grief. Doesn't want to play nice. I'm not super worried about it having a little bit of a lump right here, because we're going to have plenty of lumps to fill in anyways. I'll just kind of smooth that out. We will fold that around when the time comes. But until then, we're good. Yeah. So I'm going to actually put this on my little cup cradle with the bottom downward to kind of let gravity work with us, work in our favor for that right there. It sets in about 5 minutes, so I'll just keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't get weird drippies. But then it'll be cured enough for me to do an ice test in a little bit. I just need it set enough. It doesn't have to be cured for me to do that ice test. But this is the little cup cradle I just mentioned. A handy dandy little thing. I just got the plans off of a Pinterest tutorial. or rather a tutorial someone posted on Pinterest. I just have it like that so that my cord is coming out the bottom right there. Having that gravity will help keep this blob here a little flatter and help just kind of fill in that space. But like I said, I'm going to keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't start dripping really bad in the next few minutes. So while that's setting up, here is what we're going to use for our cup. It's called Pascal. This is one of the brand new colors from the subscription box that just came out last week or the week before. It's a holographic, very Christmassy green. It's beautiful. I've already coated 2 cups with this, and you can tell I've hardly used any of this glitter. You get really good coverage. I like how there's multiple cuts in here because these tiny pieces fill the gap in between the bigger pieces. This is going to be our decal here. It's kind of a holographic circle. And then I was going to do foil tape for the line of the cord, the wiring. That's not going to work. This is fantastic for straight lines, like for the Kelly Kaleido, the geometric designs, the plaids. I've seen some of them with this on there. They're beautiful. Or even that nail tape that they use for the pinstriping. This is great on straight lines. It's not great for curves. So I'm going to get a paint pen tomorrow and make that part of my life much easier. If you're able to manipulate that kind of foil tape, go for it. Your options are wide open. You can do foil tape, paint pen, vinyl strips, whatever. So here's what it looks like. I can still see a little gap right there, so I'm going to go ahead and put some more in there. Partly because my epoxy otherwise is just going to continue to sink down in there, and partly because I did an ice test last night. At about 10 p.m., I filled this up completely. Like the lid, had to crunch it down. I wasn't worried about the lid getting scratched by the ice because I'm going to just make this my own because I'm really excited. This is how much ice is left, and it is 7:30 a.m. It definitely does affect the seal when that gets drilled through, so keep that in mind when you're doing this. Either find a way to seal it up better, like I'm about to redo that, or just go ahead and tell your customers, because of the design of this cup, it will not keep your drink as cold or as hot as long. Most people, that's fine because one drink doesn't last them all day. But some people do expect their cups to really, really perform miracles, even under the best circumstances. So keep that in mind. I am going to go ahead and mix up a little bit more and seal that off a little bit better. And I'll do another ice test tonight. I went to trim some of that bulk off of there since I was about to add to it. It literally popped right off. So what I'm doing this time is kind of scraping it in a way that it forces it in the hole. And I think that'll help us with our seal a little bit. It may not, but it's gonna like sink down anyways. So I might as well kind of force it in there if I can. The first time around with this, I had it piled up pretty good. And it definitely sunk down and kind of filled in the hole. So I know there's some already in there. So we're just doing this to kind of help that along. And then we're going to let that cure, and I'll come back out here after work and start another ice test. And then I'll check on it in the morning and I'll show you. That version of clearing that up did seem to help a lot. It has been 24 hours since I poured this, and it is, of course, completely melted. The water is still cool, but not cold. So last night I checked this at about 7:30, so it was a 12 hours in, and there was a teeny bit of ice left. So if you drill the hole prep your customer that it's not going to insulate it as well. Most people, like I said, that is not going to be that big of a deal, but some people do expect their drink to just sit there for 24 hours. So just keep that in mind as you're doing that. I do have one other idea in mind of how I can do something to the threads to keep that, and I'll do that in a different video. But I am going to go ahead and finish this one with the original design in mind. Okay, I've got 10 milliliters of epoxy mixed up. We are not going to use all of that, but it probably will be closer to 5, maybe 6, but I don't think so. When I do a chunky epoxy method layer, chunky glitter with epoxy method, I like a much thicker base. You would not want to do this with fine glitter because it will just kind of soak up into the epoxy and make these weird slick spots, so to speak. But with chunky glitter, it helps it to really just lay down, and you have less of those wild pieces sticking up everywhere. So I'm not going to put it on quite as thick as it looks like. I smooth that out. Make sure you don't have any bare spots. Like right there. So thick, but not literally squeegeed on there. But not dripping off either. You don't want it to move really. And I'm not worried about the air bubbles in my epoxy. It's kind of cool out here, so I ended up with a few more air bubbles than I typically do. But for what we're doing, that doesn't really matter. Got my wires taped in a way that they're kind of out of the way. When I get to the very bottom, I'll probably turn off the turner and just do that part by hand, because I foresee me getting tangled up in the wires for sure. Sometime today, I'm going to attempt the next style of bottom that I just mentioned. I think it might be good with the that one part of the thread that the wire needs to come out. I think doing that with a notch, and with that one part of the wire, if there's a little space in the threads to allow the wire to lay up against the wall. Kind of like what I did on the Galaxy one, except for with a smoother spot, because on the Galaxy one I just tried to take away some of the threading of the bottom lid, but this would be more like recessing it. I think you can tell kind of how thick that is. It's there, but it lays right back down. The challenge is to not get it all over the wires, because you don't want them sticking to each other when you're not ready for any of that. Okay. So I'm going to wipe some of that off of the wire. That was kind of unavoidable. This is a little bit persnickety, for sure. Go the other way. I've handled this quite a bit without washing it afterwards. I couldn't really do that, and then I totally forgot to wipe it down with a baby wipe at the very least. So be extra mindful of bald spots. Worst case, you get a bald spot. It's not the end of the world. You can fix it. Just a little hairspray after everything has kind of laid down. It's good. So that was just a teensy bit more than 5. It's just below the 5 line left in the cup. So now we're going to glitter. Got my Pascal here. This came from Friends. I'll put a link to her shop. If you've never bought from her, the link that I post will get you a code for a $5 coupon off your first order. But if your order is more than $50, use whatever code she has at the top of her page. She changes it every year. Just like that, all the way around. Catch your glitter better than I'm doing. Is you can put it back in the jar. And then in a minute, we're gonna come and lay all those pieces down here and here. So there it is. I'm gonna clean off the glitter off that wire where there's still a little epoxy that I couldn't wipe off. But I can at least get the chunky of the glitter off of there for the moment. Be sure and pour back whatever you have that's not contaminated, because it'll last a long time. Whoa, whoa, I missed. Except for when you dump it outside the jar, like I just did. I have put glitter on 4 cups, and this is still all the way up here. It's crazy. This is my 4th one of these to get glitter, because I've had freak things go wrong with 3 of them, plus a white one, so I lost some heavenly on that one, but it is what it is. So I'm gonna wait just a couple of minutes and then come and pat down these little areas here, but I want it to kind of set up a little bit first. But I need to clean this off. I don't want that bulk on there just yet. It's already going to be enough bulk with the wires and the lights anyways. We don't really need that in our way in addition to that. So I'm going to set a timer for roughly 15 minutes and come back and just pat all that down at the edges. I'm not necessarily going to pat down the cup itself. You can kind of see some of the spots where it's kind of sticking up a little bit more as it comes around. You can see it there. I'll pat some of that down, but I want to wait just a little bit longer before I pat that down, just to keep from sliding it around. The Liquidy split has about a 15-minute work time before it's too stiff, but if I wait just a teensy bit longer, it'll really stick on there, but not much longer. So we're ready for the next step here. I went ahead and clear coated this with spray paint, just Rust-Oleum 2X clear. Doesn't matter if it's glossy, matte, satin, whatever. Chunky glitter tends to repel epoxy pretty bad. So throwing that on there just helps you avoid having those weird separated areas. So I've got 30 milliliters mixed up here. I'm just doing a nice base layer. It doesn't have to be perfect, but whenever I tack down the lights, I want it to be on resin / epoxy, not glitter. So I'm just going to put a nice finish. Doesn't have to be thick because I don't want to add unnecessary bulk right now. It's already going to be bulky enough with the thickness of the lights. So I'll probably only end up with about 20 on here. If you don't know what to do with your leftover epoxy, you can definitely pour it into earring molds or start like a dump mold. This is my TARDIS I'm working on. I've done some giant Legos, but mostly I pour them into earring molds, like just anything like that. I have no idea why that just changed directions. That was weird. So that's all I'm going to do next. I'm going to let it cure, and then we'll come out here and we will tack down these lights. I'm going to use my UV resin and my UV light, just because I'm trying to avoid using anything that I'm not familiar with, like super glue or anything like that, which you can use. I've seen people post about it. But I personally am just using UV resin because I know what I'm doing with that. That layer is cured. I've got my lights wrapped. Here's a little preview right there. Ta-da. When you're doing this, just kind of tape it down every so often. It doesn't need a lot of tape, but it just keeps it from kind of sliding around. And if you have wires that are kind of separated a little bit, it just kind of helps you be able to pin those down so that you can do what you need to do. So now we are going to take our UV resin, and I am just using what I got from Fran's, but use whatever you have. And I have my UV nail light, which is just right here. I've attached that handle there to make it really easy to hold on to as I'm doing these types of things, especially since I use that for decals and stuff too. There's a video of a little hack that somebody had posted somewhere. Ren, she said that she does her epoxy pretty much right after she lays decals, because she does a little layer of UV resin and that keeps it from lifting, which is amazing. So I'm just going to throw this under the 99-second cycle. Sometimes I do it twice. Sometimes I do one cycle and then I let it rotate while I'm doing another cycle, just for good measure. But it's not on here thick and I don't have to really worry about it going through a layer of glitter. So I'm just going to go all the way around, all the way around, doing this same exact thing. Here we are. Got my UV kind of tacked all the way around. I had a couple of spots that I could see were repelling underneath, where it repelled that layer of epoxy. So I went ahead and threw a clear coat of spray paint on it. And now I've got 30 milliliters of epoxy on here. So let's see how much we can get on there. I'm just going to go and try and get up against there, and then I'm going to come back and wipe off anything that ends up on the actual little bulb connector diode thingies, just to kind of help reduce a little bit of the bulk whenever I can. It's not going to make a huge difference, but every little bit helps. So just going to go around and around and around, and that's it. So that's what we're going to do on that. This will cure this particular epoxy. I can come back in 2 hours and do another coating. So that's what I'm going to do, and we'll see how much epoxy this ends up taking. I'm going to try and keep up with it this time, because I forgot to do that on the last couple that I've done. I just know that it takes a lot to get these spaces built up to where you don't really feel that. I mean, if you feel a little bit, it's not the end of the world. It's just most people don't really like a lumpy cup, but whatever. Do whatever makes you happy, because some people don't mind it. I have one particular cup that's a geode. It's one of my very first ones, and I didn't get all that great of a final coat on it, but it actually kind of has the texture that it looks like it should have. So I've never bothered recoating it because it doesn't bother me at all. The feel goes with the look. So if that bothers you, by all means, continue epoxying until it's smooth and you're happy with it. That's what ultimately matters, is that you and your customer are happy with it. So that's what we'll do, and I'll report back however many layers it takes for me to get where I need to be. Quick update. I've got 2 layers of 30 on there, and there are some spots that are super smooth like that. I barely even feel that at all. It's just the lights that we're still working on. And that might actually just be something that's gonna have to be a thing. So I'm gonna continue wiping off the excess on the top of the bulbs and just kind of letting it smooth out from there. And I'm gonna go ahead and do this one more layer of 30 to see how we end up. And then hopefully we'll be at least close enough to do our vinyl without a bunch of lumps underneath it. So this has 90 milliliters of epoxy. That's a lot. Holy moly. So I've got a spot right here that's really nice. A little lump right here. You can kind of see it right there. But I am going to manipulate my decal around it. No big deal. Because I'm going to need more epoxy over it anyways. I might as well go ahead and get my decal laid down. So we're going to put that on our transfer and lay that down. I'll also grab the paint pen to go literally up against there. Depending on how it looks when it's lit, I might go ahead and put little light vinyls on it, but that's going to have to wait till it's really smooth. I have these that I had cut out for the other one, that if I do use them, I'm going to smooth that out. It doesn't need the little base part there. It's not necessary for this because it won't look right. But I'll get the paint pen and literally just go ahead and start here. I'll actually probably carry it onto there, but maybe. We'll see. Go ahead and start there and take it all the way up to the little diode connector. I think that's what it's called. I'm trying to be sciencey, but it doesn't always work. Then I'll pick up on the other side, just all the way around. And then we'll get this transferred over and applied. And then it's going to take even more epoxy. This is the paint pen I got. It's an oil-based paint pen. I've already got it primed and ready. It's got a decently sharp tip. So I put this back on the turner just because if I use my cup cradle, I have to worry about if the ink / paint is dry. So I'm literally just going to go here, just kind of trace over my wire. Take that down. You know what? Let's go this way. I'll take it right on the other side of the little diode. I'm going to keep calling it that. Sounds reasonable. LED stands for light emitting diode, I believe. I totally might be wrong on that. I haven't had to think about it in a long time. But if we go right underneath that, it gives me a place to put those stickers, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to need to do that. Here's what it looks like. So if I just kind of tilted that off to the side, it'd be pretty perfect. It'll be pretty easy to trim off the little tail. That's like the bulb base. Be careful when you're going over a spot you've already painted, because I totally just put my hand in there. And I'm just going to continue going all the way around. I'm not going to record that because that's boring. Okay, so here's how it ended up. It's not bad. I think I'm going to like it better with one of these on each bulb. I'll show you what that's going to look like. It's not ready for this part yet. It's way too lumpy because I need it flat enough that these aren't going to do weird things. So once I get there, I'll put that like that. Or like that. Whichever. We'll see. Because then once it's off, it just looks like part of the design. But we're not there yet. So I'll go through and literally just cut that off of each one of those. But for the moment, this is an oil-based paint pen. So I'm going to go throw a clear coat of spray paint on it, because otherwise I have a pretty high likelihood of my epoxy repelling in those areas. But overall, it's pretty good. I think it'll be really cute more often lit than not. But we'll see. I also got the dots I need for the bottom, the Velcro dots. And we'll add that in a little bit as well. I'm so excited. So this is the smoothest part of our cup. I'm really hoping it's smooth enough, but it seems to be, because I definitely feel all the other stuff. So we are going to strategically position these where the lumps are not really going to affect our letters, kind of like that. And I'll actually come back, and whenever I put the bulbs, I'll just put it right over the letter. It'll look pretty cute. I mean, worst case, I mean, it might have a little 3D look, but that's okay. This whole thing is a 3D look. So I'm starting at the center. I just eyeballed it as far as having it straight. It won't be all that obvious if it's a little crooked. Right here, there's a little bit of a lump over that light right there. But just kind of work your way over. It's a little weird putting a design on any kind of a curved surface for sure. The trick is just to be patient. When you're pulling that up, make sure you're not pulling up your vinyl with you. I've done that so many times. So that's that part. I've got my Velcros on the bottom here. I just got this at Walmart. Nice and thin, not too beefy. This fits perfectly in between the screw holes there. So pretty perfect. I put one side on the bottom of the cup and then the other part on the actual battery pack. And I'm just going to let it sit there, and just makes it easy. So whenever somebody needs to replace the batteries, or if they want to pull it out to turn it on, they can. And just kind of curl it up, stick it back in there. Just like that. And then our lid, it's called a lid, but I don't think it's actually called a lid, will screw on. Just like that. I'm having technical difficulties. You get the point. That's where it's gonna go. I'm not getting it on because of the angle I'm standing, but that's where that will go. I'm ready to go ahead and put some UV resin over this part. That will keep this from lifting. So you can literally spread it around. Doesn't need to be thick, it just needs to be on there. My light is possessed, it keeps turning on its own. So just thin enough that it coats it, thick enough that it coats it. the idea behind this is to kind of, it's almost like gluing it down, because vinyl is notorious for lifting. The glue, adhesive, whatever that's on the back of the vinyl needs time to kind of bond. But this skips that process completely. And I'm just using my UV light, my nail lamp. I'll post the link. But it's the same exact process as when we were tacking down the wires. We're just going to let that cure, and then I'll throw a layer of epoxy over this. That will help kind of build it up just a little bit more, so that whenever I'm ready to do the Christmas bulbs, I've just got it even thinner, flatter. I think I'm going to cut my bulbs a little smaller too. I'll do that before we start the next part. I also need green. When I printed these the other day, I was working on a different design, and so I don't have any green. So I'll reprint that with red, yellow, green, and blue rather than purple. I'll save the purple ones for another time, because I love Christmas lights that have purple, because that's my favorite color. Earlier I mentioned the lid not fitting, that I was having technical difficulties. No, I'm a ding dong. It was actually hitting right there where it is coming out. It's not completely flush up against the bottom of the inside part there. So this is what we have going on there. I took a regular lid and sanded it down with my orbital sander. Just enough to go on there like I need it. Just like that. It fits perfectly. So now we're ready to do our little Christmas lights. Got these. I've got my layer of epoxy here. And I'm going to just lay this down right on top. I do have a few spots on here that are not as smooth as I wish it was. I'm done. I cannot put any more epoxy on here. And this is for me. So I'm not going to be quite as worried about it as I would if this was an order. So it'll look like that when it's not lit. You'll be able to see the little lights. I've still got to push them down, obviously, but I'm going to do that all the way around. I'm going to go whatever direction it is pointing. So like this one, the wire, air quotes wire, is going this way on the light, so my bulb will go that way. Here it's going underneath here, so my bulb will go that way, just like these two do. And I'm going to do that all the way around. So I have all the little bulb stickers on. I went ahead and went over each one of those with UV resin, just because I really don't care to have them move and have any ugly surprises when I come check on this in the morning. So I just went ahead and glued them down. Better safe than sorry, for sure. So now I'm just putting my final coat on here. I definitely have lumps in the light areas. I'm not gonna sweat it, honestly. If that bothers you, maybe find a way to make it a little bit more flattened out. There's a couple of these that didn't lay down like I needed them to. And next time I will just be more mindful of that. I'll just make extra time to make sure that that's not a thing. On my next one too, I'm not gonna drill a hole. Like I mentioned multiple times already, it did definitely affect the performance of this particular insulation. So there may be some out there that have a high enough lip that that's not really going to be as big of a deal, but this is definitely not it. my next one, I'm actually working on kind of flattening out an area of the threads. And I'm going to super glue the wire right there, because if it's recessed completely, the threads from the lid won't do anything to it. It won't shred it or anything. So that's it. I got a big old lump of UV resin right there. That's lovely. So again, not perfect, but this is going to be my own personal use. I can't wait until an appropriate amount of time has passed that I can use it. I have one coworker that worked retail for too long, and she's broken. Christmas is definitely historically traumatic for her because of working in retail, but I'm slowly breaking her. Each year I get Christmas music on just a little bit earlier, but still I'm pushing it, getting it any farther than like a week before Thanksgiving. She humors me so well. It's great. So I'm hoping this is my last coat, but it actually may not be. I definitely got too much lump on there. I wasn't paying attention. That's what I get for crafting and watching Coco. I just wasn't paying close enough attention. But for all instructive purposes, it'll do. For what the points are there, even if it didn't turn out perfectly, which most of my stuff doesn't turn out perfectly anyway. So I'm not actually heartbroken, because I feel like that's pretty normal for me. So this last 20 milliliters, I'm going to try and concentrate around the areas that are pretty lumpy. And then that's it. After it cures, it's done. So we'll just do this right here to kind of fill in those gaps, or in those, kind of smooth out those lumps a little bit better. And then that's it. Stay tuned. In a couple of days, I should have a non-lighted version of this cup as well. Same glitter, same decal, but a little bit different light creation, so to speak. All right, I hope you enjoyed it. You have a good one.